Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Mending Pakistan's ties with the West via the Middle East, Unveiling the motivations, Tajik ISKP's calculated strikes on Iran, Israeli tanks batter Gaza hospitals, displaced set to flee, why the war in Gaza makes a nuclear Iran more likely, Iran and Pakistan set to meet soon to repair ties after tit-for-tat strikes, Mending Pakistan's ties with the West via the Middle East, Diplomat. Pakistan has alienated the West and isolated itself from the established democracies of the world due to its choices in foreign policy. The country's support for the Afghan Taliban has not only created a rift with the West but has also failed to achieve strategic benefits for Pakistan. Additionally, Pakistan's policy of naming and shaming India has not worked in the West, where it is seen as an abettor of terrorism, while India is seen as rightly distancing itself from Pakistan. Pakistan needs to reassess its foreign policy and find common areas of cooperation with the West to maximize its national power and prestige. The recent conflict in Gaza and the Iranian attack on Pakistan present an opportunity for the country to mend its ties with the West. Pakistan can signal its intent to play an active role in US-backed, Saudi-led diplomacy to resolve the Palestinian question and normalize ties with Israel if a two-state solution is achieved. This aligns with Pakistan's official policy and its backdoor engagements with Israel. By supporting Saudi Arabia's leadership on regional issues, Pakistan can project itself as a responsible player aligned with the dominant faction of the international community and regain lost social capital in Western capitals. The Middle East theater is more favorable for Pakistan than the Indo-Pacific one in terms of great power politics. Pakistan has historic ties with the Middle East, while India's ties with the Gulf are primarily economic. Pakistan's relevance in the Middle East is natural, and leveraging that relevance for strategic ends can help alleviate its isolation and improve its popular perception in the West. China, which sees Pakistan as an important bridge to the Middle East and the Islamic world, is likely to appreciate Pakistan adopting a pro-West, pro-Saudi Arabia stance in the Middle East. Unveiling the motivations, Tajik ISKP's calculated strikes on Iran, Diplomat. The Israel-Hamas war has had an impact on the religious and security landscape in Central Asia, despite Gaza's distance from the region. While al-Qaeda-affiliated Central Asian Sunni extremist groups limited their engagement to expressing support for Palestinian Muslims through statements, the Tajik militants of the Islamic State Khorasan province, ISKP, orchestrated a suicide attack in Iran under the banner of liberating Jerusalem and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The attack came after ISKP's spokesman released an audio message urging IS members and supporters to carry out attacks against Jews, Christians, and Shia Muslims in support of Muslims in Palestine. The Tajik wing of ISKP responded to the call and carried out a suicide attack in Kerman, Iran. The Gaza war has intensified the sectarian animosity between Sunni and Shia extremist groups. Sunni groups such as al-Qaeda and the Islamic State reject Hamas due to its collaboration with Shia entities, especially Iran and Hezbollah. The Tajik wing of ISKP, unable to directly engage in the conflict in Gaza, prioritizes sectarianism and directs its attacks against Shia communities in Iran. The recent attack in Kerman during a commemorative ceremony for a top Iranian general dealt a significant blow to the Iranian regime and led to a sharp escalation in the conflict between Pakistan and Iran. The Israel-Hamas war has led to increased militant activities and propaganda efforts by Central Asian Salafi jihadi groups affiliated with the Islamic State and al-Qaeda. Iran's destabilizing initiatives and support for proxy Shia terror groups may have far-reaching consequences for the security of the Central Asian region and could trigger a surge in sectarian violence. The Tajik wing of ISKP has demonstrated its ability to carry out sophisticated attacks and has expanded its influence in the region. Israeli tanks batter Gaza hospitals, displaced set to flee. South China Morning Post. The Israeli military is looking into reports that a crowd of people waiting for humanitarian aid in Gaza City was hit by Israeli fire on Thursday, killing at least 20 people and wounding 150. The previous day, a crowded shelter in Gaza was hit by a strike, killing 12 people and leaving 75 wounded. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, did not directly blame Israel for the attack on the shelter. The Israeli military says it has ruled out that the strike was carried out by its aircraft or artillery but is still investigating. It says the building might have been hit by a Hamas rocket. The fighting in the southern Gaza town of Khan Yunis has isolated its two main hospitals, stranding hundreds of patients and thousands of displaced people inside. Thousands of people have recently rushed to escape farther south, crowding into shelters and tent camps near the border with Egypt. On Thursday, Thousands of displaced Palestinians who had taken refuge from Israeli shelling in the UN compound were preparing to flee to Rafah, 15 kilometers away on Gaza's southern edge. Why the war in Gaza makes a nuclear Iran more likely. Foreign affairs. The ongoing conflict in Gaza may not result in the clear victory that Iran has claimed. While the war has bogged down Israel, Iran's main regional foe, and forced the US to focus on preventing further escalation, it has not led to major new offensives against Israel or the US by Iran's proxies. This suggests that Iran is not strong enough to go on the offensive and still relies on its allies primarily for defense. As a result, Iran may feel more vulnerable and decide to pursue nuclear weapons as a deterrent. However, a nuclear-armed Iran would be very dangerous and difficult to prevent. It is therefore important to restart diplomacy and try to find a peaceful solution to Iran's nuclear program. The reluctance of Iran to fully engage in the conflict in Gaza suggests that the country is not as powerful as it portrays itself to be and is instead a reticent actor on its back foot. The breakdown of talks between the US and Iran comes at a time when Iran is getting closer to being able to produce nuclear weapons. The exact timing is difficult to predict, but it could be as soon as a few months. Tehran still has reasons not to build a nuclear weapon, such as the risk of triggering a regional nuclear arms race and angering China, but it may decide that the benefits outweigh the risks. The US and its allies do not have a good way to stop Iran from going nuclear, so diplomacy is the best option. Restarting talks will not be easy, but it is necessary to prevent the situation from deteriorating further. Iran and Pakistan set to meet soon to repair ties after tit-for-tat strikes. South China Morning Post. Iran and Pakistan will hold talks in Islamabad next week to discuss the recent cross-border airstrikes and to try to avoid further conflict. China has offered to mediate between the two countries, however, both Iran and Pakistan believe they can resolve the conflict themselves. The talks will focus on how to combat the ethnic Baloch militant groups that are waging insurgencies against Pakistani and Iranian security forces. The two countries have a joint interest in combating this threat, as well as in restoring their historically close ties. The talks will also focus on how to avoid similar incidents to the recent airstrikes. The Iranian attacks in Pakistan were in retaliation for attacks on Iranian nationals by the anti-Iran militant group Jaish al-Adl, which has members that are mostly ethnic Baloch. The Pakistani official speaking on condition of anonymity described Iran's military action as an own goal because Iran targeted its only peaceful major border. The official also said that the onus would be on Iran to show how it will improve its border security. The ever-expanding Middle East war. Economist. The war in Gaza continues to escalate, with militants from 4 other Arab states becoming involved. Israel's military has failed to find the top leaders of Hamas or most of the Israeli hostages they are holding. The Israeli security officials are concerned that bargaining will undermine the military gains they have made. Iran's proxies have become a liability for their patron, and the country is struggling to deploy them while simultaneously avoiding being dragged into the conflict. The US is also trying to find a balance, with President Joe Biden being cautious and not wanting to be drawn into another war in the Middle East. The chaos in the Red Sea has caused only modest economic damage to Israel, but Egypt has seen a 40% reduction in revenue from the Suez Canal, a vital source of hard currency. Egypt is leading the push to free the remaining hostages, mainly out of economic self-interest. The country has taken the lead in indirect talks between Israel and Hamas, with the deal being proposed in 2 stages. The first stage would be a humanitarian release of civilian hostages in return for a truce that could last several weeks. The second stage would free captive Israeli soldiers in exchange for a full ceasefire. The Israeli government is divided over these conditions, with the more pragmatic wing supporting a lengthy truce to free the hostages and negotiations for a new government in Gaza. However, Mr. Netanyahu's right-wing coalition partners are opposing any ceasefire. Hamas is also divided, with its political leaders supporting the first stage of the agreement, but the leaders in Gaza demanding an Israeli withdrawal before another release of hostages. Mr. Netanyahu may have to make a decision soon, as there is growing pressure from protests in Israeli cities, led by the families of hostages calling for a ceasefire and for Mr. Netanyahu's resignation. From opposite sides of war, a hunt for elusive facts. New York Times. Fact-checkers and misinformation analysts in the Middle East are struggling to combat false and misleading narratives during the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. Disinformation watchdogs have been overwhelmed by unfounded narratives, manipulated media, and conspiracy theories that have spread rapidly across social media platforms. Challenges for fact-checkers in the region include limited access to reliable information, accusations of bias, and increased harassment and threats. The emotional toll on fact-checkers is also significant as they are exposed to violent and graphic imagery, and some have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder. Despite these challenges, fact-checkers in the region have been conducting valuable work to verify claims and provide accurate information. However, the lack of established fact-checking organizations in the region has made the task more difficult. There is a need for the development of fact-checking websites and disinformation research in the Middle East to combat the spread of false information during times of conflict. Can the Palestinian Authority be beefed up? Economist. The Palestinian Authority, PA, is facing multiple threats, leaving it weaker than ever before. The PA is responsible for overseeing the West Bank, while Hamas controls Gaza. The West Bank has remained relatively calm in comparison to the frequent conflicts in Gaza, due to the PA's preference for negotiations with Israel rather than violent resistance. However, the PA now faces three major threats. Firstly, Jewish extremists who want to annex the West Bank and end the PA's rule have moved from the political fringe into the heart of the Israeli government. Secondly, Hamas poses a growing challenge, as the success of their attacks on Israel has reinvigorated Palestinians' belief in the armed struggle. Finally, internal battles within the PA over who will succeed Mahmoud Abbas, the current president, as well as issues of inefficiency and corruption, have further weakened the PA. Israel has also been tightening its control over the areas supposed to be run by the PA, increasing the number of checkpoints and conducting violent acts against Palestinians. Additionally, Israel is throttling the PA financially by withholding much of the cash collected in import taxes on its behalf. The PA is facing criticism for its inefficiency and its leaders' self-serving nature. However, despite these flaws, the majority of Palestinians in the West Bank still want to reform the PA and negotiate a two-state solution with Israel. How many countries still have the death penalty? BBC. A convicted murderer in the US is set to become the first person in the world to be executed using nitrogen gas. The number of executions globally is rising, with 883 recorded in 2022, a 53% increase from the previous year and the highest number since 2017. Amnesty International believes that China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the US executed the most people in 2022. However, the use of the death penalty has decreased in the US since 1999, and several countries have abolished or limited its use in recent years. Qatar appalled by Netanyahu's reported criticism. BBC. Qatar has expressed its dismay at comments reportedly made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in which he criticized Qatar's role as a mediator in the Gaza war. In the remarks, Netanyahu allegedly told families of hostages held by Hamas that he did not thank Qatar because they finance Hamas. Qatar has been involved in high-level contacts with Israel since the 1990s and has provided hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Gaza. Israel has allowed Qatar to pay the wages of civil servants and support the poorest families in the region, a policy which has drawn criticism within Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world, bringing you the latest news and analysis from around the globe. Today, we discussed a range of topics, from Pakistan's potential to mend its ties with the West through the Middle East, to the motivations behind Tajik ISKP's calculated strikes on Iran. We also touched on the ongoing war in Gaza and its implications for a nuclear Iran. Additionally, we explored the upcoming talks between Iran and Pakistan to repair their ties, the expanding Middle East conflict, the challenges faced by fact-checkers in the region, the threats to the Palestinian Authority, the global use of the death penalty, and Qatar's response to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's comments. Now, let's dive into the analysis. Pakistan finds itself in a precarious position, having alienated the West and isolated itself due to its foreign policy choices. However, there is hope for Pakistan to mend its ties by leveraging its historic ties with the Middle East and aligning itself with Saudi Arabia's leadership on regional issues. By doing so, Pakistan can project itself as a responsible player and regain lost social capital in Western capitals. This move could also be appreciated by China, which sees Pakistan as an important bridge to the Middle East and the Islamic world. Meanwhile, Tajik ISKP's recent attack in Iran, carried out in the name of liberating Jerusalem and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, highlights the intensified sectarian animosity between Sunni and Shia extremist groups. The ongoing conflict in Gaza has further exacerbated this division, with Sunni groups rejecting Hamas due to its collaboration with Shia entities. This underscores the complex dynamics at play in the region and the potential for increased sectarian violence. In the midst of the Gaza war, fact-checkers in the Middle East are facing significant challenges in combating false and misleading narratives. limited access to reliable information, accusations of bias, increased harassment, and threats pose obstacles to their work. Despite these challenges, fact-checkers are conducting valuable work to verify claims and provide accurate information. The development of fact-checking organizations in the region is crucial to combat the spread of false information during times of conflict. The Palestinian Authority is facing multiple threats, leaving it weaker than ever before. Jewish extremists, Hamas, internal battles, Israeli control, and financial constraints have all contributed to its current state. However, the majority of Palestinians in the West Bank still want to reform the PA and negotiate a two-state solution with Israel. The path ahead for the PA is challenging, but there is hope for change. Moving on, the global use of the death penalty is on the rise, with several countries, including China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the US, executing the most people in 2022. However, the use of the death penalty has decreased in the US since 1999, and many countries have abolished or limited its use in recent years. This reflects a global trend towards the abolition of capital punishment. Lastly, Qatar has expressed its dismay at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's reported criticism of its role as a mediator in the Gaza war. Qatar has been involved in high-level contacts with Israel and has provided aid for Gaza. While this policy has drawn criticism within Israel, Qatar continues to play a role in facilitating dialogue and supporting the region. In conclusion, the news today highlights the complexities and challenges facing various countries and actors in the Middle East. From Pakistan's potential to mend ties with the West, to the escalating conflict in Gaza and its implications for Iran's nuclear program, and the threats faced by the Palestinian Authority, the region remains a hotbed of geopolitical tensions. The role of fact-checkers in combating disinformation and the global use of the death penalty also underscore the broader issues at play. As always, I encourage you, our viewers, to share your thoughts and engage in the discussion. What are your thoughts on these developments? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.